Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 997. 997. Friday, December 27th, 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, we have some important stories to cover today, so let's get right to it. Where do we begin? Okay. Well, let's start right here. From Breitbart. Senator Magoo. The late Senator Magoo. It was Magoo who passed the dossier to the FBI on December the 9th, 2016. But we now know from the Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz report that it was Senator Magoo who passed the dossier that actually contained all 16 of the Steele memos. Up to that time, the FBI had only 11 of the Steele memos because they had to cut off Steele as a source for leaking to the media. Of course, we know they continued using a back channel through Bruce Orr. But it was Kramer, Magoo's right-hand man, that gave the dossier to BuzzFeed that he got from Confusion GPS. Senator Magoo had to know that the dossier came from Confusion GPS, and he would have known very well, because of his connections to them, that they are a company that does smear campaigns. Magoo knew it all. I don't have time to go into everything about Senator Magoo. But as you know, if you've watched my videos for very long, particularly back around the time after we learned about the Trump Tower setup, that I laid out a pretty good case of circumstantial evidence why I believe that Senator Magoo was very involved in the setup of the Trump Tower deal. I just don't have time to go through it all again today, but his connections to everyone involved and other things, I made a pretty good case, I think. And I do believe that when Durham gets to the bottom of this, we are going to find that Senator Magoo had a lot more going on in his association with Glenn Simpson, Confusion GPS, the dossier, the Trump Tower setup, and other things, that he was a major player in the coup. So obviously, as people continue to read into the IG report, they continue to find more and more as they go through it. So this is a revelation that's come from reading in the Huckleberry Horowitz report, where he tells us that at the time that Senator Magoo delivered that copy of the dossier to Comey on December the 9th, that the FBI at that time only had 11 of the memos. But the copy that Magoo gave Comey had all 16 memos in it. Now, for those of you who are new to the channel or have forgotten how this all came about, Magoo was at a conference in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where he bumped into Sir Andrew Wood, who's a former associate friend of Christopher Steele. Now, this was all a setup because Steele had asked Wood to approach Magoo, which means he knew that Magoo was going to be there. Now, how did he know that? Well, we don't know, but something tells me we're going to find out, and something tells me it will have to do with David Kramer, Magoo's right-hand man. So Wood starts telling Magoo and Kramer about the information and Steele dossier and Steele, and Magoo says, yeah, I'd be very interested in that. I'll put my man Kramer here on it. So Kramer goes over to the UK to get Steele's material, but Steele says, well, I'll show it to you, but I'm not going to give it to you right now because it's not done. But as soon as I finish it, which will be very soon, I'm going to send it over to Confusion GPS, Glenn Simpson, and he is going to email you the copy. So that's exactly what happens. Glenn Simpson of Confusion GPS sends over the file to David Kramer, which contains all 16 of the so-called Steele dossier memos, at which point Kramer goes about the business of passing it on to various media people, including BuzzFeed, who will eventually publish it, and he gives a copy to Magoo, who then goes into Comey's office on December 9th and gives him a copy of it. So that is just one more thing, one more piece of evidence that shows us that Magoo was a lot more... I mean, you have to remember, why did they go to Magoo? There's a reason. And it's not because he just popped up on the radar screen. And if you go back to the Trump Tower meeting, look at the people involved in there, Vetselnitskaya, particularly Akhmechan, who was also at that Halifax, Nova Scotia conference. Akhmechan was there, Rinat Akhmechan, who accompanied Vetselnitskaya to the Trump Tower meeting. And so there are these connections, and of course we know that Vetselnitskaya herself took a photograph from John McCain's office. So clearly, Senator Magoo has these connections to these people, and he just shows up in too many places, and he's also got Kramer, who he sends over to Ukraine, where he gets hooked up with Chalupa. He's hanging around with the same propaganda group over in Ukraine, where he, I don't know if he knew Chalupa before that, but he makes association with her there, certainly. So you've got Magoo tied up in Ukraine, you've got him tied up with Steele in the dossier, his right-hand man Kramer, who's connected to a lot of the deep state establishment, probably the rotten Reverend Clinton and other people like that. So probably Jonathan Weiner, Newland, and all those people would be the type of people that Kramer would be hanging around. So, again, we are going to learn a lot more in Durham's investigation, I do believe, just as we're getting this information from Horowitz. So, for whatever reason, even Fox or for whatever reason, a lot of Republicans do not want to talk about Senator Magoo's involvement. But at some point, they're just not going to be able to cover it up any longer. And I'm tired of covering up for this scumbag. Magoo, Senator Magoo is a rotten son of a bitch. And I've known this for a long, long time. I can go all the way back to the 90s, late 80s actually. But particularly late 80s, going to early 90s with all the stuff that went on in Bosnia. He was a cheerleader for that war, helped get us into that war. His involvement with some despicable characters throughout his career. This guy is just a scumbag. And I do hope that we eventually get to the bottom of all that he was involved in, because it's a hell of a lot more than what's been made public to this point. Senator Magoo, a nasty son of a bitch. Well, it looks like Andy McCabe is crying. He's crying because he says that the FBI won't turn over documents that he has requested in his lawsuit over his dismissal. He's got a lawsuit because he thinks he was fired because of political reasons. Can you believe the irony of that? He thinks he was fired for political reasons, and he's upset because they won't turn over documents that his lawyer has requested to help make his case. He's involved in the biggest political corruption scandal in the history of the damn world, certainly in our country. But he's saying that in his case that he was fired because it's political. No, he was fired because he lied at least 3 times, and that's just the lies he told to the Inspector General. That's not even touching on all the things he was involved in with the coup plot and many other things. This guy's got a lot of problems, most of them criminal and legal. Wow, did you guys happen to see that crazy Christmas card that the crooked Clintons, Hillary herself, posted up on Facebook? Pretty creepy. So, for whatever reason, you know, the rotten Reverend Clinton likes to put up photos of when the Clintons were in the White House. So she posted up this Christmas photo, and it's her and crooked Slick Willie. And keep in mind, of course, we all know that the rotten Reverend is Crooked Hillary, because that's what Trump named her, and she is crooked as she can be, as a dog's hind leg. But don't forget that Slick Willie is also a crooked Clinton, and we know that because of the testimony of Paula Jones. And she told the court in those hearings that she could prove that Slick Willie whipped out his pecker, to put it mildly, whipped out his pecker at her, and she told the court that she could prove it because she said there was a very distinguishing characteristic about Slick Willie's Willie. And as it turns out, we came to find out that what that distinguishing characteristic is that Slick Willie has a crooked pecker. So both the Clintons are crooked. We have crooked Hillary and crooked Bill. They're both crooked. Now, in this photo, this old White House photo from a Christmas when Bill Clinton was president, they're standing in front of this Christmas tree. And if you look at the Christmas tree, as the Christmas tree gets toward the top, it literally makes like a turn. It's crooked. The top of the Christmas tree is crooked. So here you have crooked Slick Willie, crooked Hillary standing in front of a crooked Christmas tree. Now, that's crooked, but it gets even worse. As I have said many times, the Rotten Reverend Clinton has no, what's the term I used to use? She has no natural qualities as a politician. No natural tendencies or anything like that. She's a very bad politician, just on the surface. Not to mention all the other things, but she just doesn't have it. And the instincts of the Rotten Reverend are very bad. So the first thing that a lot of people, I even thought it myself, when you first look at the photo and you look at the dress that Crooked Hillary is wearing, you will notice that it looks a lot like that dress that Bill Clinton is wearing in that portrait that was painted for Jeffrey Epstein and is hanging on his wall. So this is getting a lot of play today, a lot of people commenting on it. You have, again, the Rotten Reverend Clinton has horrible instincts. She puts up a pic of 25 years ago when her and Slick Willie were in the White House. The two crooked Clintons standing in front of a crooked tree, and she's wearing the dress that looks just like the dress that is in the portrait that's Slick Willie's wearing, that's hanging on Epstein's wall. Horrible political instincts, if you ask me, by the Rotten Reverend Clinton and her crooked husband. The whole group of them. Crooked Hillarys, crooked Bills, the crooked Clintons, the whole group. Crooked people, man. Crooked. Alrighty. Speaking of Christmas, I guess by now you've heard that Christmas sales this past year were an all-time record high. An all-time record high, right along with the stock market and many other things. Again, President Trump doing an amazing job on the economy, and he just keeps getting win after win after win. This guy wins all the time. He turns losses into victories. He will turn. I was just telling someone the other day, I said, you watch. President Trump will turn impeachment into a positive. He will find a way to turn his impeachment, he will turn it into a positive. He's already doing it. You can't beat this guy. Well, we have Senator Perdue from Georgia is saying that a couple of senators, Democratic senators, will likely vote to acquit Trump. How about that? And they're saying that there's 3 right now that are very likely Democrats who will not vote to impeach, in the Senate will not vote to impeach Trump. And that would be Doug Jones of Alabama, and I think we understand why, Gary Peters of Michigan, and Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. Apparently, all 3 of these Democratic senators are likely not to vote for the impeachment in the Senate. They are, in fact, prepared to vote to acquit Trump. Boy, oh boy, would that ever be egg on the face. Maybe that's why Pelosi doesn't want to send them articles over. It could be a very embarrassing vote. And it will go down quick. I can assure you of that. We keep hearing these rumors, and now we've been hearing these rumors that Obama is getting very nervous He 2 weeks ago, he went to a bunch of big donors and said, hey, start giving your money to Warren. She needs the money. The problem is she's out campaigning that she doesn't take big corporate money, but Obama's trying to tell the big corporate people to start giving her money. But now she's campaigning on the fact that she doesn't take it, so I don't know how they're going to get it to her. But they'll probably find a way. They're all pretty crooked, you know what I mean? But then we hear that Obama is prepared to come out and actually openly endorse Warren if it looks like Bernie begins to make a move. And I've talked about this before. You know, there is a pathway for Bernie because his floor is solid. I mean, his base of support, it's not enough to win a majority per se, but it's his base of support other than Biden is higher than anyone else. Everyone else dips and rises and dips and rises. Bernie stays pretty much in a certain point where he's never really going to fall out of contention. He'll always be in the game. And if you're looking at the primaries really favor him because the first primary, New Hampshire, he's likely going to win. He's going to do very well in New Hampshire. Then he's going to go to Iowa, and coming off of probably a pretty good night in New Hampshire, he's going to build momentum, go into Iowa, and probably place certainly in the top 3, maybe in the top 2 in Iowa. Now, he's not going to do very good in South Carolina, and everyone knows that. But I don't think that's going to hurt him. But if you have to look at California is a very early voting state for the Democrats this year. So if Bernie wins in New Hampshire and then pulls off a second place finish in Iowa, then he gets out to California where he is really popular and has a pretty good ground game there. It's very likely that he could win California. And this has apparently a lot of Democratic strategists at the DNC who are playing out all these various strategies are apparently terrified that Bernie is going to come out of California the leader. And if he comes out of California the leader, he'll have so much momentum that he could roll up some victories on Super Tuesday. And he could get far enough ahead that they couldn't catch him. And once it looks like he's going to be the guy and he's got that momentum, an awful lot of people who now support Warren could leave Warren for Bernie. After all, she's running on really the female Bernie in a sense. She pretty much stole a lot of his issues. Now, he actually believes in communism. She's a phony, but he's a true believer. So I can see why a lot of people at the DNC would be very nervous, and that's why Obama is saying that if they look at the polls in California a couple days before the vote there, the primary, it's very likely Obama is going to come out and publicly endorse Warren. And that could go either way. I mean, Obama is not necessarily popular with the far left right now. And Bernie could use that in his favor as well and turn it around. So I think it's a very good possibility that you could see something like that. It's certainly making a lot of Democrats very nervous. We have President Trump telling Gavin Newsom out there in California that in a pretty straightforward manner that, hey, you either end the homelessness out there in California or the feds will. And apparently Newsom is pretty embarrassed about the situation there in California with the homeless problem, people fleeing the state like never before. I mean, California for the first time in history is actually shrinking population. People are leaving California. And I said when Newsom was elected, I said I'd be very surprised if he survives without getting recalled. And there's 2 different recall petitions right now. Whether or not they get the votes, I don't know. They still have some time. Or the signatures, I don't know. But they still have some time. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they get the signatures for a recall. Because he is destroying what was left of California. I don't think they'll survive 6 years of Newsom. I don't know how you reverse all the damage he could do. It would take a very long time. But it's interesting that you have Trump getting on the horn with him and basically telling him in no uncertain terms, hey, buddy, either you solve that homeless crisis out there or the feds will. He's not playing around. It's getting to be a real mess. And of course, we have that idiot, Michael Moore, saying that white men who voted for Trump are not good people. You should be afraid of them. Well, yeah, you probably should be afraid of us, Mike. We don't like you very much, and people who think like you. And yeah, you should fear us. You absolutely should. But this is a really stupid thing to say. Remember, one of the worst things that the Rotten Reverend Clinton did was calling half the country deplorable. This is who she's talking about. So here you have Michael Moore, who's an advocate for the left, and he's coming out saying that white men who voted for Trump are not good people. Well, here's the problem with that, Mike. In case you haven't noticed, Trump's up to the 30% range with blacks and Hispanics as well. He also does great with women, black and white. So when you make a statement like that, first of all, he's getting it wrong. It's not just white people. Trump is likely going to get double the minority vote than any Republican president has gotten, probably since ever. Maybe, I don't know. But it's been a very, 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 very long time since a Republican got anywhere near, if ever, 30% of the minority vote. Trump's on track to do that if you believe the recent polling. And it's not just one poll or two polls. There's now 4 or 5 polls showing this. And so this is not only offensive to, obviously, white men and all Republicans. It's offensive to women of all colors. It's offensive to blacks and Hispanics and everyone. It's just a very offensive comment. And if you're trying to get Democrats elected and you come out and make a statement like this, I mean, it hurts you. I mean, these people are very stupid. Very stupid. Even if they believe these things, think these things, these are the things that you don't say. I mean, if you want to win. Because people hear this stuff and they remember it. Talk about a party sabotaging themselves. I've never seen anything quite like it. Now, there's another story floating around today. This one's a bit complex. I'm not going to go deep into it today because it's just one of the stories that just kind of hit. People are talking about it. It's not been delved into deep enough for me to really dig into it deep myself. Just kind of giving you the story as it's showing up. And this was in the Gateway Pundit. And they're talking about the fact that in the IG report, it talks about the fact that there were 3 more allegations that have never really been discussed. They weren't in the dossier, but they were allegations that Steele had made that weren't in the dossier, but did make their way to the Crossfire Hurricane team, and they made their way to the Crossfire Hurricane team through Steele. And one of these stories was that Trump was wanting to appoint a Secretary of State that would lift sanctions on Russia, and he was delaying that because he was waiting for approval from Putin, and Putin was blackmailing him into nominating a Secretary of State who would lift the sanctions on Russia. Of course, this is crazy talk, but this is exactly one of the 3 stories that Steele was pushing. And we know also there was another story which came from Steele, which Glenn Simpson took from Steele. He put it on a thumb drive, gave it to Bruce Orr, and it was essentially the same story with a few different details, but basically a very similar story. And neither of these, of course, were ever able to be verified by the FBI or Mueller. And this is in the IG report. But there's something else about this first, that's in the IG report, about this first piece of information regarding this accusation that came to Steele, which he personally gave to the Crossfire Hurricane team. Now, Horowitz doesn't explain the circumstances on how Steele passed it directly to the Crossfire Hurricane team. He just says in the IG report that this particular story of the 3, this one of Christopher Steele's, he passed directly to the Crossfire Hurricane team. And it was basically this story about Putin blackmailing Trump and appointing a Secretary of State who would lift the sanctions. Now, this information that Steele gave to the Crossfire Hurricane team about this fake story that was never proven and is ridiculous on its face, Steele got it directly from, according to Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz, Steele got it directly from Cody Shearer and Sidney Blumenthal. Oh boy. Right there you go. Oh boy. There is a direct, now we have a direct action from the rotten Reverend Clinton's henchmen, Blumenthal and Shearer, giving Steele information personally, which he passed to the Crossfire Hurricane team personally. This puts the rotten Reverend Clinton in the game directly. She could no longer sit back and say, hey, I didn't know what was going on. I just paid a law firm to hire an op research firm. Everybody does it, and I don't know what was going on. Oh, no, not anymore, because Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz has just told her that it was Shearer and Blumenthal who personally gave that information to Steele, and he passed it on to the Crossfire Hurricane team. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, when Durham finishes his work, we are going to find out that Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz got a lot of things wrong. And a lot of the things that he got wrong have to do with the dossier. And we know why. He was limited to who he could investigate, and he's the cover-up man. He's the cleanup man. He's the custodian. We are going to find, when Durham gets through his work, that the rotten Reverend Clinton was the mastermind of this plot, who planned, organized, directed, and controlled it. She was feeding all this stuff. Remember, I just went through Lee Smith's book. He lays out clearly in his book. There is no, you cannot contradict the evidence because he shows it to you in his book. And I went through it with you. Chapter 6, the proto-dossiers. The 4 primary proto-dossiers were out there 2 months before, a month and a half before Steele's first memo ever even hit. And if you look at Lee Smith's book, he shows you the proto-dossiers, which he has, and then he shows you Steele's stuff, and it's the exact same material. It's just that Steele embellishes it. But it's the same material. And where does Lee Smith believe that came from? He believes it came from Glenn Simpson, Nellie Orr, Baumgartner, and possibly a couple other players. And I said, after going through that chapter, even though he could never tie Blumenthal and Shearer directly to those proto-dossiers, if you remember when I was covering that, I said, man, I just know that Blumenthal and Shearer were definitely part of those proto-dossiers. Those were coming directly through the Hillary Clinton campaign, Confusion GPS. I think that Blumenthal and Shearer were the original dirt diggers. The guys originally that were digging dirt and shoveling the garbage to Confusion GPS is a couple other sources, part of the original proto-dossiers. But you couldn't sell Shearer and Blumenthal as, guys with credibility. You needed someone like Steele. That's why Steele was brought into the picture. But the proto-dossiers were around before Steele, just like Blumenthal and Shearer. And then we're going to learn a lot more from Durham about those two as well and their involvement. And it ties back to the rotten Reverend Clinton. I'm telling you, when Durham gets to the bottom of this, a lot of people are going to be surprised because he is going to find that a lot of this stuff connects directly to Crooked Hillary. And, of course, I won't be surprised. Many of you will not be surprised. And believe me, the rotten Reverend has an appointment with Mr. Durham. She may not realize that at this point. At some point she will. And it's not going to be like the little deal she had back in over the July 4th weekend of 2016 with the FBI when she popped in for some tea and crumpets with 8 or 9 lawyers. 2 of whom should never have even been in the room because they should have been subjects of the investigation themselves. Cheryl Mills and the other lawyer. She's going to find that a sit down with John Durham ain't going to be like what she experienced back in July of 2016. No. It's going to be something much different. And she's used to lying a lot because she doesn't believe she'll ever be held accountable. She'll always get off the hook. I'm telling you, when she sits there and lies to John Durham, her ass is cooked. And I think she probably will figure that out very quickly that he's not on the team. So her day is coming. Believe me. Unbelievable news. We now have a direct connection between the Rotten Reverend, her two henchmen, Shearer and Blumenthal, directly to Steele, passing the information directly into the FBI. They're all working for Hillary. Pretty soon, John Durham's going to find out a lot of people were working for Hillary. We hear that Donald Trump is considering pardoning Roger Stone. Absolutely. I would pardon Stone, Flynn, and Papadopoulos and make sure the records are cleaned. I would bleach bit their records. All three of them set up. And they should all be filing the large civil lawsuits as well. Well, it looks like over in the UK, they're one step closer to Brexit. It looks like the UK Parliament, it appears that they have approved Boris Johnson's plan to leave the EU on time. Now, over here in the States, we're not learning a lot about Boris Johnson's plan. I've heard that there's some good stuff there and there's some stuff that's not so good. But I really don't know. I'll wait to get more details before I comment. But if this is a real, genuine exit of the European Union, this is a day to really celebrate. And I am going to celebrate on the day that that becomes official and they leave the EU. I just hope to God it's a real, genuine Brexit and not a scam. And there's another story going around again, this is another one of these stories. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens. It's just, in these stories, a lot of things are thrown out. Not a lot of sources. Things are thrown out there. And this is a story that that's suggesting, again, I think this was Gateway Pundit, and apparently the story came to Gateway Pundit through a cybersecurity expert who emailed them this information. And he's a cybersecurity expert, and he's apparently working with some group of individuals associated with William Binney, and they are, in some sort of a legal action, are going to show that CrowdStrike is a fraud. They're going to show that CrowdStrike, nor any other entity, actually even has software that can identify a hacker, and they're prepared to prove it in court. They are suggesting also that Donna Brazil leaked the DNC emails to the press. So there apparently is a lawsuit that either has been filed or is going to be filed where they're going to go after CrowdStrike for fraud, and they believe they can prove their case that CrowdStrike does not have software that can identify a hacker, and they believe they can prove this in court. There's also a Carter Page angle to this. Apparently he has a couple of lawsuits, and apparently he is, I guess, involved with this cybersecurity expert who's working on this part of the case that CrowdStrike is committing fraud because they're claiming they can identify hackers when in fact, according to these cyber experts, there's no software that will allow you to identify a hacker. So, and Carter Page has responded in a positive way by saying, oh yeah, this is something that's a part of a court filing, one of the court filings I have, and you will learn more as we move forward with this legal process. So again, we'll have to keep following this, but I'm convinced that if John Durham ever looks into CrowdStrike, he will figure that one out really quick. And where does that lead? It leads to Seth Rich. Do you think he'll go there? We'll wait and see. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.